In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about 2 functional core stability exercises for runners. So what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about what we mean by functional, what we mean by core stability. What we'll then be able to do is go into the exercises, having a bit of a better understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Before we get into that, just quickly mention, if you are a runner and you want to build your core strength and stability, you can click the link below. You can have a look at my How to Build Core Strength and Stability 12-week online program. You can go through, it features the 2 exercises that we're going to be using today, plus many more, and progressed over 12 weeks. So click the link below and go and find out some more. Part 1, we'll just quickly talk about what we mean by functional and what we mean by core stability. So when we're talking about function or functional exercises, there's something that many people miss with regards to what we're trying to achieve. So what they do is they create an exercise that replicates the movement of the sport that one is doing, and then it would be called a functional exercise. What many people don't realise is that a functional exercise is something that improves the performance of the said sport. So obviously we're talking about runners. Now we're not trying to replicate a runner's movement. What we are trying to do is improve a runner's performance. So that then opens up the doorway to using more and more exercises. So the things that we're considering when it comes to runners is, what do they need? Well, they need well-functioning core muscles to be able to stabilise the spine, stabilise the pelvis. As the foot hits the road, that needs to absorb impact sort of in the hips and potentially in the core. Plus, we need to have some degree of elasticity to go with it. So if we look at all those different components, and core stability is one of them, then what we're doing is we're choosing each component, developing that component, and then when it comes to the running, it then in some respects gets knitted together to be able to give them that better function. Now, core stability. So we talked about function, and we know that we're not just trying to replicate the movement, but we are trying to improve the performance of running. Obviously, we've mentioned core stability is a part of that. Now, first of all, what is core stability? Well, core stability is all about the timing of muscles. So, for example, when a foot hits the floor in running, so you get that first strike, you may find, or you may have noticed in yourself or someone else, that you get a knee dropping in like that. Now, what's happening there is potentially some instability through the lateral parts of the hip or the lateral parts of the torso. And this is what we would understand to be the core. So what we need to be able to do is stabilise that area. So when that foot is hitting the floor, the muscles aren't firing at the right time, and that knee is dropping inwards, and then it potentially gets pulled back out when they do eventually work. So you kind of get that movement. So you see that sort of ducking in and back out of the knee. So that's something that's going to be creating inefficiencies in running, and it's going to potentially be increasing risk of injury. So what we need to be able to do is stabilise the lateral parts of the hip and stabilise the lateral parts of the torso, so all of that area times properly and stays stable. Part 3, we're looking at the exercises themselves. So we're going to look at 2 exercises and 2 progressions. Now, we've just looked at what functional is, and we've just looked at what core stability is, so we now have an understanding of what the exercises want to achieve. It's building stability through the outside of the hip, so the lateral parts of the hip and the lateral parts of the torso. And that stability is getting the muscles to time. So what we need to be challenging is our balance through the hip and through the torso. So the first exercise that we're going to do is a bird dog, and that's going to be down on all fours. So it's we're going to be starting off in a relatively simple position, because I'm going to, in some respects, start you in the most simple and then talk about some progressions that you can do to try and offset the balance. So when we come down onto the knees, what's happening is we're taking the foot and the ankle out of the equation. So we are now focusing on the hip and the torso. Now, you may need some ankle stability, but we're not talking about ankle stability at the moment. We're talking about core stability. So that will be for another video. So We come down onto all fours. We maintain the neutral posture, so we find that neutral posture, and then we extend one arm and the other leg. And what we're trying to do is, at the moment, you can see I'm relatively well balanced. So my hips are level, my shoulders are level, my spine's in its neutral posture, and I'm not really wobbling anywhere. Because in that posture and in that position, my hips are nice and stable. So you may find that when you come into that position and you're quite wide, so if you look at the position of my hands and knees, they're relatively wide, so I've got a good base. So I've got a nice solid base to work from. So what we can do is, there is essentially two things we can do. Is we can bring our hands narrower, and then as we bring our hands narrower and we find that we bring them together and we're still stable, we can then close the eyes, which is then going to offset the balance that much more, because we're not using our visual system to maintain the balance. We're using what is on the inner ear to be able to read what the muscles are doing and where they are, so they can balance in that way. So we've looked at the standard posture of the bird dog. What we now do is bring hands and knees together. So we haven't got as quite a wide a base. And what you can start to see is there is a little bit of a wobble. So this is a good position to then start stabilising the hip. Because as I shift my weight one side, muscles try and catch it to bring it back. But as I then overcompensate, the other muscles try to bring it back. And that's what's creating that wobble. So over time, what happens is we don't get as much of that sort of extreme and then grab and then grab and then grab and then grab. What's happening is it's just very subtle bits of contraction and relaxation. And that's what gives us that smooth movement and that tight balance, if you will. So the final one, which will then probably instigate a little bit extra in the way of wobbling, was if I come completely narrow, I could work on that a little bit myself, just coming narrow. So what we're now going to do, we're going to go wide. So we're going to open out again, and then I'm going to close my eyes, and then I'm coming out. So I've now got my eyes closed, shoulders and hips level. I can feel a little bit of wobble, but not too bad. So I'm holding there, and then I would come down, and then I would just go through that same process of bringing my hands narrow. So that is the bird dog. Great for hip stability. Start wide, come narrow. Once you get narrow and you're stable there, go back wide again, close the eyes. As you get stable, bring the hands and the knees together. What you can then do is just play around with the timings or the reps that you do. That is something that I'm not really going to cover in this video, but you can play around with those to be able to manage and improve your core strength, your core stability. Exercise 2 is a half kneeling exercise. So again, what we're doing is we're essentially going onto our knee and chopping ourselves off at the knees. So we're, in some respects, taking again the ankle out of the equation. So what's going to be happening is you're going to come into this position. You can bring your hands across your chest. You may find that you need that for balance. But again, what we're now doing, so you could say this is a little bit more in the way of functional, because we're upright rather than being down on all fours, and we're still challenging the hips to stay stable. So again, we might be finding that we're starting to wobble like so. And obviously, if that's happening, we've got muscles sort of here, all trying to sort of catch the body. But what we do is we bring hands across here, hold nice and firm. So we've just got a mild brace, and we're just holding that position. So again, we would use the same principle as the bird dog. So we would start wide. So here I'm on what I would describe as tram lines, and then if I bring my foot all the way across, I am now on a tightrope. So I'm holding here, and I can feel that there's a wobble. So I can feel that coming in there, in the hip. Now you can again use the same example. You could then come across wide, and then you can close your eyes, and then again you'll feel what's going on in each of the hips, and you'll be able to manage that wobble because the inner ear is now reading what the hips are doing, not the visual system of the eyes. What you can then do, just like with the bird dog, is you can come across nice and narrow and close the eyes. And again, what you'll notice is a lot of feedback is being sent through the hip and even that front foot to understand where my body is with regards to being upright and being stable. The final thing that we can do with this one is to add a little bit of movement. Now, all this is there to do is to offset the centre of gravity. So it's very, very simple. We just bring hands to one side, so the hips are forward and the heads are forward. The hands come to one side. Now, if you wanted to, you could hold on to something. I'm not going to because I don't really feel the need to. So you can just come into this position, and then essentially you come up and across to offset the centre of gravity. So obviously it's being pulled this way because my arms are out here, and now I've got to correct. So as I come up, it shifts the centre of gravity to the other side. So again, I'm challenging what needs to be happening with regards to what the hips are doing. So that's just a very simple way of building in some extra hip and core and spine stability with regards to running. And then what you're also doing with this one is you're getting a little bit of rotation from the thoracic spine. Now again, in running, you'll need a little bit of rotation to allow the arms to swing. So again, this half kneeling posture is becoming that much more functional because we've got a movement of the arm, we've got a rotation of the thoracic spine, we've got a stability of the spine and of the hip, which is giving us that core stability. Those are the two functional core stability exercises for runners and a number of progressions. So you've got the narrower stance, you've got the closing of the eyes, and within the half kneeling, you've got the movement and the movement of the arms and the rotation of the thoracic spine. Now again, why are we doing that? We make it functional not by recreating the movement that runners would do, but by looking at the components at which is required to improve the running. So again, we're not trying to recreate it, we're trying to improve it by using those components. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully it's given you a better idea of exercises to do for core stability as a runner. And also it may open your eyes to a slightly different perspective on how you go about improving your running using core stability exercises. So that's Chris from Christopher Hole. Many thanks for watching. I'll speak to you in the next tutorial.